The wait is finally over, and Toyota just dropped a shockwave through the global truck market. After years of rumors, leaks, denials, and quiet prototype sightings, the Toyota Stout is real. It's coming in 2026, and the number that has the entire auto industry panicking is this: $10,000. Not 20, not 15, $10,000. In a market where basic pickups now cost more than luxury sedans used to, Toyota is about to reset everything. This is not a gimmick truck, and it's not some vaporware concept meant for auto shows. The Stout is being positioned as a brutally simple, purpose-built pickup designed for people who actually work, haul, repair, and depend on their vehicles every single day. Toyota looked at runaway truck prices, bloated features, overcomplicated tech, and said enough. The Stout is about utility first, affordability first, and reliability above everything else. Under the hood, Toyota is going old school in the smartest way possible. No massive touchscreen dependency, no fragile hybrid systems on the base model, no subscription features. The Stout is expected to use a proven, naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine tuned for durability, not bragging rights. This is an engine designed to run forever, handle bad fuel, survive extreme climates, and be repaired anywhere on the planet with basic tools. And here's where things get really uncomfortable for American automakers. Toyota isn't chasing horsepower wars or luxury badges. The Stout is laser focused on small business owners, farmers, contractors, delivery drivers, young buyers, and families who just need a truck that works. A real steel bed, real payload capability, a real ladder frame, not a unibody compromise pretending to be a truck. Inside, Toyota is doing the unthinkable in 2026. They're keeping it simple: physical buttons, a basic digital display where it actually makes sense, hard-wearing materials that don't crack, peel, or fall apart after 2 summers. This is a cabin you can climb into with muddy boots, tools in your hands, and not feel like you're damaging a luxury product you overpaid for. The price is what turns this from impressive to explosive. $10,000 puts the Stout below used truck prices in most markets. It undercuts compact pickups, undercuts aging fleet vehicles, and completely obliterates the idea that trucks must be expensive to be viable. Toyota isn't just selling a vehicle here, they're attacking the entire pricing structure of the modern auto industry. And make no mistake, this is not charity. Toyota knows exactly what it's doing. This truck is designed to dominate emerging markets, developing economies, and price-sensitive buyers worldwide. But it also sends a brutal message to the US market. If Toyota can build a reliable pickup at this price, then the excuse that trucks must cost $40,000, $50,000, or $60,000 instantly falls apart. The Stout also exposes something deeper and more dangerous for legacy automakers. Over the past decade, manufacturers abandoned the low-end buyer in pursuit of higher margins. Base models disappeared, affordable trims vanished, everything became premium. Toyota just walked straight into that abandoned space and planted a flag. Production strategy is another quiet bombshell. Toyota is expected to use global modular platforms, localized manufacturing, and simplified supply chains to keep costs brutally low. Fewer chips, fewer electronic modules, fewer parts that can fail. This is manufacturing discipline that most automakers forgot how to do. And while critics are already saying it won't meet expectations or it won't be sold everywhere, Toyota doesn't need to sell this truck in massive volumes in every country for it to be a success. Even limited availability creates pressure. Even small numbers force competitors to explain why their cheapest trucks cost 3 or 4 times more. The Stout also arrives at the perfect moment. Truck buyers are exhausted, prices are collapsing, inventory is piling up, incentives are exploding, trust in automakers is at historic lows. Toyota is stepping into chaos with a product that feels honest, grounded, and brutally rational. What makes this even more dangerous is what comes next. Once buyers accept that a $10,000 truck is possible, every other price tag starts to look fraudulent. Every entry-level $40,000 pickup suddenly feels absurd. And once that mental shift happens, there's no going back. The Toyota Stout isn't just a truck, it's a market correction on wheels. It's a direct challenge to greed-driven pricing. It's a reminder of what vehicles used to be before finance departments took over design studios. And as 2026 2026 approaches, the real question isn't whether the Stout will sell. The real question is how many automakers are about to realize they built themselves into a corner they can't escape from, because once buyers see what Toyota is offering at this price, they're going to start asking why every other brand chose to abandon them in the first place. And when that question starts spreading, it doesn't stop at pickups. It moves into SUVs, into crossovers, into fleet vehicles, into the entire structure of the modern auto market. And that's where things begin to get truly uncomfortable, because Toyota didn't just revive the Stout name to sell a cheap truck. They brought it back to remind the industry of something it desperately hoped consumers would forget. That affordability was never impossible, it was simply abandoned. And now that Toyota has dragged that truth back into the spotlight, the entire industry is scrambling to control the damage. Because once buyers realize that reliability, utility, and price don't have to be mutually exclusive, the illusion of necessary high prices collapses fast. What really terrifies competitors is how familiar this strategy feels. Toyota has done this before. The Corolla, the Hilux, the original Tacoma, vehicles that weren't flashy, weren't hyped, but quietly outsold and outlasted everything around them. The Stout follows that same DNA, and that's why this isn't just another budget pickup announcement. It's a long-term threat to brands that survive on upsells and financing tricks. And let's talk about timing, because Toyota picked it perfectly. As EV adoption slows, battery costs fluctuate, and governments quietly walk back aggressive mandates, buyers are rediscovering the value of simple internal combustion vehicles. Toyota never fully abandoned that market, and now the Stout becomes the ultimate proof that simplicity still wins. No charging anxiety, no software bugs, no $8,000 battery replacements looming in the background. This truck also hits directly at the fleet market, and that's where things get really ugly for competitors. Municipal fleets, delivery companies, utility services, and small businesses don't care about giant screens or ambient lighting. They care about cost per mile, downtime, and repairability. A $10,000 Toyota pickup that runs for decades is basically a nightmare scenario for anyone trying to sell overpriced fleet contracts. Then there's the used market impact, which almost no one is talking about yet. When a brand new, warranted Toyota truck costs the same as a 10-year-old pickup with 200,000 miles, the used truck bubble starts deflating fast. Dealers lose leverage, private sellers lose pricing power, and suddenly, the entire ecosystem built on inflated used truck values begins to unravel. The Stout also sends a subtle message to younger buyers who've been completely priced out of the market. This could be the first brand new vehicle a whole generation can realistically afford. No crushing debt, no 7-year loans, no feeling like you're trapped financially just to own transportation. Toyota is rebuilding brand loyalty from the ground up, and that kind of loyalty lasts decades. Even the design choices reflect intent. The Stout isn't trying to look aggressive or futuristic, it looks honest. Straight lines, functional proportions, no fake vents, no oversized grills screaming for attention. This is a truck that doesn't need to prove anything, and that alone makes it stand out in a sea of over-designed, overpriced competitors. And here's the part that really changes the conversation. Toyota isn't saying this is a limited experiment. They're positioning the Stout as a global workhorse. This approach also quietly restores independence to the owner. Modern vehicles increasingly lock basic functions behind software, proprietary tools, and dealer-only access. The Stout pushes back. It's designed to be serviced locally, repaired affordably, and kept running without constant digital intervention. That alone makes it attractive to rural buyers, off-grid users, and anyone tired of feeling hostage to a service department. And then there's global demand, which might end up overwhelming initial supply. Markets across Asia, Africa, South America, and parts of Eastern Europe have been begging for a modern, affordable pickup that isn't disposable. The Stout fits perfectly into that gap. Toyota already has the distribution, the manufacturing experience, and the brand loyalty to scale quickly once demand proves real. Back in the US, even limited availability could still reshape expectations. One glance at a Stout parked next to a bloated full-size truck is enough to spark a conversation. One test drive is enough to remind buyers what driving a tool instead of a luxury appliance feels like. And once that comparison exists, it can't be undone. What's also being underestimated is how the Stout influences influences policy discussions. Affordable vehicles change the math on emission strategies, urban planning, and transportation access. When reliable transportation doesn't require massive debt, economic mobility improves. Toyota isn't pitching that angle publicly, but the implications are obvious to anyone paying attention. Competitors are already caught in a contradiction. They claim affordability isn't possible, yet they're terrified of a truck that proves it is. They argue consumers demand tech and luxury, yet the excitement around the Stout is driven almost entirely by what it doesn't include. That contradiction is exposing how far industry messaging drifted from reality. And here's the part that could hit hardest: resale value. Toyota vehicles are already known for holding value, but if the Stout starts cheap and remains desirable, depreciation becomes minimal. That flips ownership economics entirely. Buyers aren't just saving up front, they're protecting long-term value in a way most modern vehicles can't. Every leak, every spy photo, every rumored spec adds pressure, because the more people see, the more they realize this truck isn't about nostalgia, it's about correction, a reset, a return to basics at a moment when complexity reached its breaking point. And Toyota didn't choose the Stout name by accident. It's a signal, a callback to an era when vehicles were named for what they did, not how they made you feel: strong, dependable, uncomplicated. That branding choice alone tells you exactly who this truck is for and who it isn't trying to impress. As anticipation builds, the narrative is shifting from excitement to expectation. People aren't asking if they'll buy it, they're asking when and how soon. They're calculating budgets, they're comparing it to everything currently on the market and realizing how distorted pricing has become. And this is where the pressure peaks, because once expectations solidify, disappointment becomes dangerous for competitors, not for Toyota. Toyota only needs to deliver something close to what it's promising. Everyone else needs to explain why they couldn't. The Stout is becoming a benchmark before it even launches, a reference point, a measuring stick for honesty in an industry that hasn't had one in years. And as that benchmark solidifies, it forces uncomfortable comparisons that ripple outward, reshaping buyer psychology in ways no incentive or rebate can undo. Because when people finally see a truck built for function, priced for reality, and engineered for longevity, they don't just get excited, they start demanding the same logic everywhere else. And that demand is exactly what the industry has been trying to avoid, because once consumers stop accepting inflated norms and start asking for justification, the power balance shifts, negotiations change, and the era of unquestioned pricing begins to crumble. And the Toyota Stout sits right at the center of that shift, quietly proving that the problem was never technology or regulation or supply chains. It was priorities. And once priorities are exposed, the entire conversation changes. Because now the question isn't whether Toyota can sell a $10,000 truck, it's whether the rest of the industry can survive in a world where buyers finally remember what fair value looks like. And as that realization spreads, it pushes everything toward a breaking point that hasn't fully arrived yet, but is getting closer with every passing announcement, every leaked detail, every confirmation that this truck is not a rumor, not a concept, but a real product headed straight for a market that wasn't prepared for it. And that unprepared market is already showing cracks. Inventory levels are climbing, incentives are getting louder, messaging is getting desperate. You can feel it in the tone of advertisements that suddenly emphasize value again after years of ignoring it. The Stout hasn't even launched, and it's already forcing a shift in language across the industry. What's especially telling is how quietly some competitors are reacting. No public criticism, no bold dismissals, just silence. And in this business, silence usually means panic, because challenging the Stout directly would require admitting that a decade of upsizing, overpricing, and overcomplicating vehicles was a strategic mistake. Toyota, meanwhile, is letting the product speak. No flashy celebrity campaigns, no futuristic buzzwords, just numbers, durability claims, and real-world use cases. That restraint is intentional. It signals confidence. It says this truck doesn't need hype because its existence alone rewrites expectations. The Stout also reframes the idea of entry level. For years, entry level meant stripped but still expensive. Now it means accessible. It means attainable without financial gymnastics. And once that definition resets, every other base model in the market looks dishonest by comparison. There's also a psychological element that's hard to quantify but impossible to ignore. Buyers feel respected by this approach. They don't feel manipulated into upsells. They don't feel punished for choosing practicality. That emotional response creates loyalty that marketing budgets can't buy. There's also a cultural shift happening here that most analysts are missing. For years, trucks became status symbols instead of tools. Bigger grills, taller hoods, louder branding. The Stout rejects that entire mindset. It doesn't try to dominate the road visually, it just does the job. And that appeals to people who are tired of being sold an image instead of a solution. Toyota's global reputation plays a massive role here too. This isn't a startup promising the world and delivering delays. This is a company with decades of credibility in building vehicles that survive abuse most brands wouldn't dare test. When Toyota says this truck is built to last, people believe it, and belief is everything when you're challenging an entire market. The ripple effects are already forming. Competitors are quietly reevaluating canceled compact truck programs. Suppliers are recalculating cost structures. Governments in emerging markets are watching closely, because if Toyota succeeds, it sets a precedent that affordability can return without subsidies, without gimmicks, and without sacrificing quality. And the Stout doesn't even need to dominate sales charts to win. It just needs to exist. Its presence alone forces comparisons, forces conversations, forces consumers to ask uncomfortable questions every time they walk into a dealership and see a $40,000 entry-level truck with plastic trim and empty promises. What's coming next is the real wild card. Once Toyota proves this model works, expansion becomes inevitable. Slight upgrades, regional variants, specialized fleet trims, and every step builds on the same foundation of simplicity and cost control. Meanwhile, competitors are stuck trying to downscale vehicles that were never designed to be affordable in the first place. The Stout also quietly challenges the EV narrative without directly opposing it. It doesn't argue against electrification. It simply reminds buyers that the cheapest, cleanest vehicle is often the one you can actually afford to keep and maintain for decades. Longevity becomes sustainability, and that's a message that resonates far beyond marketing slogans. As launch approaches, the tension inside the industry is rising. Executives won't say it publicly, but they know what this means. Once the Stout hits the road, excuses stop working. The idea that this is just how expensive vehicles are now dies instantly, and when that belief dies, consumers don't just demand better prices, they demand better honesty. This is how disruption actually happens, not through flashy concepts or impossible promises, but through a simple product that exposes how unnecessary complexity became the norm. The Toyota Stout doesn't scream revolution, it quietly undermines everything built on excess, and that makes it far more dangerous than any headline-grabbing supertruck or experimental EV, because it speaks directly to the everyday buyer who was told they no longer mattered. And once those buyers realize they were never the problem, that the system simply stopped serving them, the shift that follows doesn't reverse, it accelerates, it reshapes priorities, it forces recalibration across the entire industry, and the closer we get to 2026, the harder it becomes for anyone to pretend this is just another niche vehicle, because the Stout is steadily turning into a mirror held up to the auto market, reflecting every decision, every markup, every abandoned buyer, and asking one simple question that no manufacturer wants to answer. Why did it take this long to give people what they actually wanted? And that question doesn't fade, it gets louder the more details surface. Payload numbers start circulating, durability testing leaks out, real-world cost estimates begin replacing marketing fluff, and with every new data point, the Stout looks less like a risk and more like an inevitability. What's fascinating is how Toyota is reframing value itself. Instead of asking buyers to stretch budgets, they're shrinking the product to what truly matters. Frame strength, engine longevity, easy maintenance, parts availability. These are things that don't trend on social media, but they dominate ownership satisfaction over 10 or 20 years. Toyota understands that long-term trust is worth more than short-term margins. A platform that can evolve, different bed lengths, single cab, extended cab, two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, maybe even diesel or alternative fuel variants down the line. The base stays cheap and buyers build up only if they actually need to. That modular approach is deadly because it scales without inflating costs. It means Toyota can respond to demand without redesigning the entire vehicle every few years. It means parts availability stays high and prices stay low. It means ownership doesn't become a financial trap 5 years down the road. Meanwhile, other automakers are stuck. Their factories are too complex, their their platforms are too expensive. Their profit models depend on luxury margins. They can't just wake up tomorrow and build a $10,000 truck without admitting everything they've sold for the past decade was wildly overpriced. And consumers are starting to notice. Social media reactions are already explosive. People aren't just excited, they're angry. Angry that this wasn't offered sooner. Angry that affordability disappeared. Angry that they were told cheap, reliable trucks were impossible while paying record prices. The Toyota Stout doesn't need massive marketing. The price does all the talking. The simplicity does all the convincing. Every headline, every comment section, every comparison video spreads the same uncomfortable idea. The auto industry didn't fail consumers, it chose to abandon them. And as more details leak out, as production timelines become clearer, as real-world specs start replacing speculation, the pressure is only going to intensify. Because once the Stout actually rolls onto dealership lots, once people touch it, drive it, and realize it's real, the conversation shifts from "is this possible?" to "why isn't everyone doing this?" And when that question takes hold, it doesn't stop at Toyota, it doesn't stop at trucks. It spreads into every segment, every price bracket, every promise automakers have made, and that's where the real disruption begins, because the Stout isn't just offering a cheaper option, it's exposing how fragile the entire pricing structure has become. And once that structure starts cracking, the fallout doesn't happen slowly, it accelerates, it compounds, and it forces decisions that many companies were hoping to delay, because now buyers have seen the blueprint for affordability again, and they're not going to unsee it, especially when the Stout proves that you don't need luxury gimmicks, digital overload, or bloated pricing to build a truck that actually works. And that realization is spreading faster than the industry can control, because once people start comparing what they actually need versus what they've been forced to pay for, the entire value proposition of modern trucks collapses in real time.